Welcome back to Order's Digest. This week, we're going to focus on Haiti, or Haiti.
Now let's turn to the situation in Haiti. We begin in Haiti. A 72-hour state of emergency has been declared in Port-au-Prince.
Now to the crisis in Haiti. The U.S. has sent in special tactical teams to help protect American embassy staffers.
Turn tonight to the danger in Haiti. We have been reporting here on the spiraling chaos in Haiti, gangs surrounding the capital.
Now let's turn our attention to Haiti. The country's capital is under siege. Gangs have overrun Port-au-Prince.
Mounting uncertainty in neighboring Haiti despite efforts by CARICOM, the regional bloc, to craft a transitional presidential council.
It's one of the countries that, if you read about, it has almost all outstanding metrics in many things. And also the Kenyan government is planning to send at least 1,000 police officers to help bring back democracy and maintain the chaos in the country. Some very interesting facts about Haiti. First of all, Haiti is the only country that was formed by a successful slave rebellion. Any other country that had a slave rebellion was not successful, and other revolutions were by different classes of people. In Russia, it was mostly driven by the workers. The French Revolution, it was mostly driven by the merchants who wanted to kick off or kick out the aristocracy that was there. Now, another fact, Haiti is the country with the highest export of labor per population level. About 84% of college-educated Haitians live out of the country. And then again, it has the lowest human development index. Now, how did Haiti get there? It's a very long story. A lot of it is, history that they have from being a colony of France and international interventions that came into the country and other natural disasters that got it there. So there's a lot of ideas that what happened to Haiti was because of external influence. What I'm concerned with is, could there be anything that Haiti could have done to remedy the problems that they had between internal problems and external problems? What caused the heaviest balance to lead Haiti to become chaos? Now, let's go back to 1804 when Haiti declared independence. At that particular time, France had just undergone a revolution, and the leaders who were there actually preferred that Haiti becomes an independent country. They knew that France was weak, or they were busy fighting wars with other countries in Europe. So they're like, okay, let's take up arms. They organized themselves and managed to actually defeat a very big army, a French army, and also a subsequent invasion attempt by the British to take advantage of Haiti. At that time, Haiti was the richest country in the world. I'll repeat that, richest country in the world. Richer than the United States, richer than all Spanish possessions within South America. For two reasons. It had the best or the highest quantity of two products that were very expensive during that time: sugar and coffee. About 60% of sugar that was sold in the world came from Haiti. And also a very sizable chunk of coffee sold in the world came from Haiti. And then also the French had installed some better production processes in Haiti that ensured that the refinement of sugar was very good, as well as the processing of coffee, and even boasted having a very large bourgeoisie community in Haiti. So it was the jewel in the world, and the French really considered that to be a treasure. So when they declared independence, the French could not withstand losing a jewel that they had in the Caribbean for that. So at that time, Napoleon sent about 50,000 men to go and kick out the Haitian government and reinstall slavery at that point. Due to the, understanding the terrain better, the Haitian army defeated the French army. Now, after Napoleon lost his war, the European countries set up a very big reparation burden on France. So France looked around and they're like, okay, where are we going to get money to repay back, Austria, the UK, and other countries that they fought against and lost? They're like, okay, you know what? We used to have a very rich colony in the Caribbean. So what happened? The French government sailed some warship and got to the shores of Haiti. And now the then president, who was called, I think it was Jean-Pierre Boyer, or Boyer, if read it in French. He received a letter from one of the French captains. It was like, hey, you can either pay us as reparation for the plantations we have here, or my army, which is over there, is going to invade you. So Boyer capitulated and decided, he'll give the French what they want. And the French set up about 90 million francs, which a lot of money during that time as repayment for that. This money put a very big burden on the Haitian economy, and they had to figure out how to repay back France. Some estimates indicate that about 80% of the revenue collected from Haiti was used to repay back France in that. Now, something happened here. Because there was no money, only 1% was used to pay up for education for that. On top of that, Boyer, who was the president at that time, decided education was going to be limited to only families who have contributed to the Haitian government or the Haitian country in a way. So when you're going to take your child to school, your father has to go to a board and explain to himself how he has contributed to the country. If the board feels like the contribution was not meaningful, then a child can't go to school. Second to that, Boyer did not want a very big educational caste, if you may call it so, in the society, because revolutions tend to come from the people who have ideas, and ideas come from educated people. Now, these were internal things that Haiti could have done to change the internal dynamics. So he decided, you know what? We're going to limit to who's going to get education. Apart from that, the Haitian society also, now, the Boyer was what you refer to as a mulatto, which is a derogatory term for half black, half white. His father was black, his mother was white. He was educated in France. He was more privileged. So he also entrenched his privileged mulatto people within the society. And then there was the military, made most of black people, and then the rest were there. It's worth noting that in the transatlantic trade, about 40% of slaves from Africa ended up in Haiti, where they made up about 90% of the population. Haiti was populated by a tribe known as the Tainos, who were sort of like the Indian tribes that lived within America. So the blacks made up, after the transatlantic trade, the blacks made up a very huge chunk for that. Now, here's something you think about. When the Russian Revolution happened and the workers took over there, the workers are a slightly skilled segment of the population. And one of the funniest things that happened was when they took over the factories and the means of production, because they believed in communism, they realized they couldn't run these factories effectively. Even Lenin had to sign an order to allow some form of capitalism to exist in certain key industries, because they realized we need those managers. We need those people with a certain level of education, knowledge to manage a company or an organization. So started bringing back people. Haiti also did a bit of that. They realized a lot of the plantation they had fallen into disarray. They were providing the slave labor to cut, plant, water, irrigate, but managing storage, managing the export business needed someone with a little bit more of knowledge. So some of the people they kicked out, they had to bring them back to manage this plantation. So at this point, they had to build their own middle class or middle people who can take up the management role in that. Remember, the education they were not looking at started becoming a problem. for them. So now you have a society where you have a lot of slaves or ex-slaves people with barely any education, and then you have the military class sitting at the top and barely people sitting at the middle. The middle part of a society is extremely important, and the people who understand that know that you have to build and cultivate that. If you look at an example, in the same period about the 5th century, when China was a very big trading partner for most of the Asian world and they were exploring the world. As a matter of fact, Chinese were the first people to circumnavigate the world before Christopher Columbus. Even though there's a very interesting book about how the Chinese discovered America first before Christopher Columbus did it. The Chinese had this class of people known as the Mandarins. And the Mandarins were people who were educated in Confucian education. And he talked about harmony, about management, about government, and so many other things. For you to join this class of people, the first qualification was that you had to be educated in the Confucian way. The Confucian is the Chinese word for, I think, Kung Fu Tzu. He was a very influential Chinese philosopher. Now, when the king wanted to invade another country, the first thing he would get advice from his Mandarins. If he wanted to raise taxes, they would tell him like, okay, don't tax sugar, tax this, because they had the knowledge, the information about how to get things moving. And it becomes extremely important on how do you create this middle people. They're not the ruling class, nor are they the lower class. They're this class of people who are mostly made up of intellectuals. They get gears moving. In Europe, when the European armies were being reformed, they held up a minute like, wait a minute. You can have a lot of people who know how to kill, but they don't know what they should kill. So the army ended up being stratified in 3 areas: the strategic part, the tactical part, and the operational bit. Now, the strategic part decides where are we going to invade, who should we invade. It's made up of generals, all from the 2-star generals to the 5-star generals and above. There's the middle section here, the tactical bit, which is mostly about if we're going to invade here, how many ships do we need? How many vehicles do we need? How many tanks do we need? How many horses? They mostly look at the logistics for that. And then you have now the lower, the operational level, which is now, okay, now do the killing and do all that. Now, that structure in World War II, Germans really understood how it gets used. And one of the theories is that the Russians easily overcame the Germans, partly because Germany was losing a lot of that middle level officers. So if you have a bunch of 100K soldiers who don't know what to do and where to go, then they opt to surrender for that. So the generals cannot fight because they sit in office. The soldiers cannot fight because they don't have direction. So it ended up being the people who made a lot of the difference in the wars ended up being these middle tier officers from a colonel, a major, a captain, and a lieutenant. They became extremely important, and sometimes they could decide some missions on their own based on what they observed in the ground. Now, the Haitian society was missing these middle income people. Remember, the second start about Haiti is that they lost all the educated people outside. Now, fast forward to about 1957. A crazy doctor selling some concoction to treat some disease that was very strange to Haitian people convinced people he had the magic treatment for everything. And he walked around homes selling this magic potion he had. And he got a nickname called Papa Doc and became very famous in the Haitian community, such that he ended up being elected as president. His name was Francois Duvalier. Due to his influence and talking about he has these magical powers, and by the way, he reintroduced voodoo as the official religion in Haiti. Once he got to power, one of the things he did was to set up a sort of like a militia The same way Hitler created the SS as his own, a military that only takes command from him. Also, François Duvalier created a militia that was only answerable to him, and it's outside the official structure for police and the military. They're known as the Tonton Macoute. This guy's work was to suppress any political dissidents and opposition that was directed to him, but as well as rid the country for educated elites, because these are the people who would come and change the minds of people and change how people think and perhaps throw him out of office. And during that time, 80% of educated people in Haiti ended up leaving the country. Now, this is an internal thing that the country could control. Not to ignore other factors, because just before this period, the United States invaded Haiti and actually just took a ship, went straight, packed it into the port, took a bunch of soldiers, they walked straight to like the Haiti Central Bank, picked up all the gold, packed it back to the ship and disappeared. On top of that, Haiti was occupied by the United States, and the United States businessmen and other people were interested in tapping the potential for Haiti, went and set up plantations and a form of other, like an economic domination of the country. And that really, killed that development of the country, because any money that was made ended up in the US. And this time they were still paying back loans to France. So these were external factors that were pressing the country. But now, ridding the country of these educated elites, this is an internal thing that the Haitian government was actually causing to itself. And in most societies, it's a structure that the toughest guy, mostly these are militants, make the top brass. They have a coup or do something that end up being the ruling class. And then this ruling class, for them to have any effective change in the society, they encourage or develop this middle class, which is mostly made up of civil servants for that. And then these civil servants help have the top-down infiltration to the lower class. They understand how to put processes in place and ensure that to advise accordingly on what actions should be undertaken. Now, another theory that's put out is that one of the reasons why the British government was able to set up the British Empire was because they had a very good civil servant, tax collectors, people to ensure that laws are followed, how to rule one tribe while using another tribe as protecting, the ruling class, so on and so forth. The British government did a very good job of setting up this middle cadre, and it helped once the soldiers go in and conquer an area, then this middle class clumps in and manages that area. So Haiti did away with their people who could help, bridge that thing. That's not to say that the leaders were visionaries. There was a lot of reports of corruptions. In fact, Haiti has had, I think, 8 prime ministers within 7 years. Most of them assassinated out of office due to a lot of internal disagreements for that. The ruling class tends to be the military, who's like, if I don't like you, I take you out. And then someone else didn't like the person who took out, so they take out this other person for that. So if we were to say between external factors and internal factors, what played the major role? From an economic perspective, the external factors did weigh a lot on Haiti becoming a chaotic country. The internal factors, what they could control, yes. Given time, Haiti could have developed this class that could have helped them figure out, okay, we're mostly an agricultural country. What should we grow? How should we grow it? What customs do we need? But that lacked. And it's really funny, after the independence in 1804, now the president sat down like, okay, what are we going to do? US had refused to recognize Haiti as a country because the US figured out that if they recognize it as a country, the slaves in their own country are going to revolt. So we're not going to accept Haiti as a country. And then one senator stood up and said, like, you know what? If we accept them as a country, they have to set up an embassy in our country. Think about having a black ambassador in our country. That's going to set a very bad examples to our own slaves. So the US government refused to recognize the country, as well as Britain. Britain wanted the plantations for itself. And of course, France was very bitter for losing the plantations there. So the president said, like, you know what? Our first most important thing to do is to ensure that we don't have an invasion, because an invasion is looming. The US might invade us just to make sure that slavery is reinstated, not so that their slaves back home are not agitated. Britain wants to steal what belonged to France. And France is still mellowing on the days when they control the sugar and coffee trade in the world for that. So they looked around like, okay, how can we raise money to build up a military? They looked around and said, the only thing we have are plantation. Now, these former slaves who were now fought and a lot of them died, had their freedom. So the president sat down and said, like, you know, what you need to do, you have to go back to the plantation so that you can make money that we can use to build a bigger army or a navy so that we can fend off invasion. They're like, but we just fought so that we could not in the plantation. So the president passed a law which now forced people to work back in the plantations they were in. And the people revolted. A group of people decided, you know what? We've done enough fighting. We're going to hide in the hills and build our own society there. So they ended up with a different society that was living in the hills and created their own rules. And a lot of them ended up being the rebels who would go and kick out the president. At this time, there was very little being invested in building education, building people who could come and advise and say, like, okay, we need money to build a bigger army, but perhaps could there be a different way? This is this civil servant middle part of society that you need mostly to tell you, okay, as a president, as a ruler, I need to expand my army. How do I expand my army without putting my people back to another form of slavery that was there? And like, okay, let's export. How do we get other countries to help us? There are other things that were tried out, offering land to black people who have escaped the US to come and settle there. And a considerable number came, but they figured out the society was not ready for anything. They could not integrate easily. There was a language barrier. The president had put up his own people to be on the top for that. So they realized, you know what, let's just go back to the US. So there were some internal things that the country could have done to ensure that they're not weak. One of the things that is very evident, if you're weak, someone would invade you, right? Now, Haiti, once, came out of slavery, you'd think they'll be very idealistic and hate slavery. One of the first actions they did was to invade their neighbors, the Dominican Republic, because they're like, you know what? We want your land. Yeah, we've just got freedom and the world is in chaos. We want your land. And they fought a very long war between Dominican Republic and Haiti. And they eventually decided, you know what? We're not making any gains. So they went back to whatever territory they had. Anyone powerful will always invade anyone weak. The only thing you can do is to ensure that you're not weak. So when the US is coming to invade Haiti, it's because they've figured out there's a weakness in the structure of their society or their community. Hierarchy is very important. When you miss that middle part, somehow your society becomes imbalanced. In Germany, when the communist revolution happened in Russia and parts of the Slavic countries, Germany was looking at seeing what kind of, because it was a very bloody revolution. The Tsar, Nicholas II, was butchered in his home together with his family. A lot of social upheaval ended up being the name of the day. The Germans hated it. They're like, we don't like our king, but in our ruling class, but also we don't want the madness that comes with communism. So they opted for reformation and not a revolution. Same thing happened in Britain. In Britain, they opted for a reformation. They're like, okay, let's take out some powers from the king. Let's vest more powers in parliament. Let's make the prime minister, more powerful, and let's share power between different people. Because they realized the stability was very important. Most revolutions end up failing because you've upset the structure of society. If you read a little bit more about, for example, how Europe ended up the way it is today. Europe was ruled by king, queens, and that aristocratic family. And they had the feudal system where serfs were bound to lands and work, which is a form of slavery. When the Black Death came and a lot of the serfs died, the kings and the queens and the dukes and the viscounts could not have enough people to work on their lands. Now, these people had a voice. They decided, like, you know what? We're going to renegotiate. Now, over time, feudalism died out, and they were replaced by the merchants and the bourgeoisie. The bourgeoisie are the people who created the Industrial Revolution, and they were the merchants who made a lot of money. Because they were oppressing their workers, the workers revolted, and that's how communism came up. Communism was about making everyone equal, but a flat society almost does not exist. You can almost not avoid hierarchy. Just like a company, you need the CEO and the founders to bring in the money, put in the vision. Then you need the managers and the mid-level management to ensure they interpret the vision, and then you need the workers to work. If you take away the middle management, the CEO cannot work, okay? Also, the workers cannot work because they can't get supervision and direction on what to do. So when you upset that system, it becomes chaos. Hierarchy does not mean oppression. What people fought for all along was oppression, not against structure. So countries that opted for reformation tended to be stable. Example of Germany and the UK. Companies that opted for revolution had to revert back to some form of hierarchy. Even France, after the revolution and defeat of Napoleon, they reinstated back their monarchs for a while. Communism never worked in China. In fact, mass starvation followed the communists by Mao, and they're like, okay, where do we need communism and where don't we need communism? So reformation ended up a better option than revolution in the case, because revolution is let's ban everything. Reformation is like, let's ensure you're the king, let's ensure you're the emperor, but we have rights as the people lower the cadre. And what's happening in Haiti right now is that structure has been upset. Nature abhors vacuum. So when that management structure disappeared, the gangs came up and said, you know what? We want to be that management structure, the middle and the top. They've not made it to the top yet, but they're now filling that vacuum. Like managing cleaning of streets, lights are up, ensuring that there is security. They'll come up and say like, okay, now we are the new management in place. And that's what the mafia does in Italy. That's what the Yakuza did in Japan. When some form of vacuum comes in, like we come in and plug in there. So you have a country where the social upheaval has been happening for a while, partly because of internal problems or not figuring out how to create that structure, but also external interventions. And now Kenyan police are about to go into that mess without really understanding what's happening there. They cannot fill that vacuum, that middle vacuum needed. Perhaps they can do it temporarily for them, but once they pull out, they need to be repopulated back or replaced by somebody else. The collapse in Afghanistan, when the US pulled out, the Taliban came back to power after 10 plus years of war. Because the first thing that, when a war happens, is the first people you lose are these middle class people. Because they have skills that they can take somewhere else. They also have a little bit of money to afford travel to other places. So when the US pulled out, there's need for managing some form of basic things that a society needs. Taliban comes and like, hey, we will ensure when someone steals your goat, there's justice. We'll ensure this is a reporting way of something else. Somalia, when the civil war kicked in, Somalia lost almost 80% of its educated people. And then who fills that? Al-Shabaab, right? So you need to manage, retain that middle cadre in society. Until next time, like and subscribe.